Lady Seraphina of Crestwood knew the meaning of duty long before she knew the meaning of love. The two were inseparable threads in the tapestry of aristocratic life. Her duty was simple and absolute: to marry the Duke of Blackwood, stabilize her family's failing fortunes, and secure the lineage of a powerful ancient house. The man she was to marry, Duke Alaric, was a legend whispered of in drawing rooms, but not for romance. He was the wounded duke, scarred by a war that had claimed his health and seemingly his soul. Their courtship was brief, conducted entirely through stiff correspondence. Alaric never requested a meeting, and Seraphina knew better than to ask. She accepted the arrangement with a quiet grace, refusing to mourn a love she had never known, but holding a secret resolve to fulfill her contract completely. The wedding itself was a muted affair held in London, with only distant relatives attending, lasting barely an hour before the carriage whisked Seraphina away. As dusk settled, the carriage finally turned down the long, overgrown drive leading to Blackwood Manor, an edifice that seemed less like a home and more like a stone fortress guarding an enduring sorrow. The house was enormous, Gothic, and oppressively silent, its windows dark eyes staring out over the moorlands, untouched by the warmth of modern living. Seraphina was met not by a welcoming party, but by a severe housekeeper who guided her through echoing hallways to the grand dining room. There, standing by the cold hearth, was the Duke Alarectal, forbidding. Cloaked in black wool that absorbed the meager light, his face an impenetrable mask of formality. Lady Seraphina, his voice was deep, resonant, and devoid of warmth, like a bell tolling for a forgotten hour. "Welcome to Blackwood. I trust the journey was tolerable." Seraphina curtsied low. "Your Grace, it was perfectly comfortable." "Thank you." Her composure was the only armor she wore in that formidable room. His face, though handsome beneath the shadow of his brow, bore faint, ragged scarring across his left temple, a physical manifestation of the psychic wound she had been warned about. "Let us be clear," Alaric stated, not moving from the hearth, his dark eyes fixed on her, as if assessing a necessary opponent. "This is a contractual arrangement. You have secured your family. I have secured an heir. There will be no demands made upon your person." Seraphina met his gaze without flinching. "I understand my duty, Your Grace. My demands are only that you treat me with the respect due your Duchess." He gave a curt nod, an expression of surprise barely registering on his cold features. "That, at least, is easily granted." He offered no further conversation, eating a hurried, silent supper before rising abruptly. "You will be shown to your chambers. I bid you good night." Seraphina found herself alone in the vast bridal suite, its hangings dusted, its fireplace untouched, feeling less like a bride and more like a carefully stored museum piece. Over the next week, the pattern established itself with chilling precision. Alaric would appear briefly at dinner, exchange minimal formalities, and retreat. He spent his days locked away in his private study, accessible only by a hidden staircase, or walking the desolate grounds with a loyal, silent groundskeeper. Seraphina learned to manage the enormous, poorly run house, tackling the household accounts and dismissing the overly familiar, gossiping servants. She noted the subtle details of her husband's sorrow, the slight stiffness in his gait, the way his hand twitched when he thought he was unobserved, and the absolute silence that pervaded his study door. She realized he was not merely cold. He was caged by an invisible anguish, trapped in a self-imposed prison of guilt or pain. The empty spaces in the manor seemed to amplify his absence, making his presence or lack thereof the most defining feature of her new life. On the 5th day, she rebelled against the chill, ordering fires built in the drawing room and her own chambers, filling the air with the scent of pine. She found an unused piano in the long gallery and began practicing simple, melodic pieces, hoping the sound would disturb the pervasive stillness. One evening, after a particularly tense dinner, Seraphina noticed Alaric had left a book on the mantelpiece, a rare edition of military history, bookmarked on a passage about a disastrous siege. She dared to leave a small, thoughtful note inside the page. The historian's judgment is often far easier than the soldier's burden. The next morning, the book was gone, and Seraphine's heart pounded with the realization that he had seen her intrusion, her tiny act of emotional sabotage. That afternoon, she was working in the main library when Alaric finally sought her out. entering the room with a deliberate, intimidating slowness. "I do not require commentary on my reading material, Duchess," he stated. Standing near the towering shelves, his figure framed by centuries of inherited knowledge, Serafina slowly set down her pen. "I offered no commentary, Your Grace, only perspective." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a dangerous intensity. "Misunderstand the nature of this arrangement, Serafina. We are partners in title, not in intimacy or opinion. I agreed to the duty of marriage, Alaric, not the duty of silence," she countered, using his given name for the first time, testing the boundaries. The use of his name shocked them both, a tiny, necessary tear in the veil of formality that separated them. He did not reprimand her. Instead, his gaze softened fractionally, a flicker of the man buried beneath the armor of the Duke. "You are persistent," he muttered. Oh, almost to himself, the faintest hint of something akin to admiration in his tone. "If I am to live here, I must live with the truth of it, Your Grace. And the truth is that Blackwood is dying of silence." Alaric turned away, walking to the windows that overlooked the gloomy park, his back rigid. Some things are better left unspoken. A few days later, while exploring the neglected East Wing, Serafina discovered a small locked room that didn't appear on the house plans. Driven by a mounting curiosity about the man she married, she used a skeleton key found in the housekeeper's forgotten desk to enter. The room was not a military relic, but a musician's haven, a grand dust-sheeted cello, stacks of sheet music, and a worn velvet conductor's baton. This was the true hidden wound, the loss of a passion, a life of artistry exchanged for a life of duty and death. As she carefully lifted the dust sheet from the beautiful dark wood instrument, a sudden noise behind her made her jump. Alaric stood in the doorway, his face pale and contorted, his carefully constructed composure finally shattered by her violation of his sanctuary. "Get out," he commanded, the voice rough with contained violence, the word a raw exhalation of pain. "Alaric, she began, but he cut her off, his eyes dark with a pain that went far beyond mere physical scarring. "You trespass on the one place I have left. I told you, keep your distance." He strode across the room and slammed the sheet music onto the floor, scattering the fragile papers. Serafina did not run. She stood firm by the cello, refusing to be intimidated by his outburst, choosing to confront the source of his misery. "Tell me then. Tell me why a room full of music causes the Duke of Blackwood such agony," she demanded, her voice ringing with protective strength. Alaric stared at her, breathing heavily, the years of repression fighting with the immediate need to confess. "I cannot play it, my hand. The shrapnel." He finally spat out, his voice thick. "The fingers will not move with the precision required. The Duke must manage estates, not make music." The physical injury was clear, but the emotional blow was what had crippled him. The death of his artistic self. "I was supposed to be a scholar, a musician. I was a second son. Now I am the Duke, and all I can do is sign papers with a clumsy hand and live with the memory of the men I couldn't save." The wartime guilt was finally confessed, a raw, burning truth that filled the small room. "My wound is not just the scar, Serafina," he continued, turning away, ashamed. "It is the constant, humiliating failure to be the man I was, and the inability to be the man I am supposed to be. This house, my duty it, is all penance for a past I cannot change. And I will not drag you into this wreckage." He finally turned to look at her, his dark eyes pleading for her to run. "This marriage is a failure. You have satisfied your family's demands. Leave, Serafina. Be free of Blackwood." Serafina walked toward him, stepping carefully over the scattered music, her path clear. "You misunderstand duty again, Alaric," she said softly, reaching out a hand, though not yet touching him. "My duty is not to my father's ledger or your title. My duty is to the man I married, wounded or whole. I married the Duke, yes, but the man beneath the title is my husband, and I will not leave my husband to drown in self-pity and silence." She reached his side and slowly picked up a piece of scattered sheet music, smoothing the creases with gentle fingers. "I did not marry a man who can play the cello," she stated, her voice steady. "I married a man who loves the cello. That is a difference I can live with." Her acceptance was so absolute, so devoid of pity, that it stripped him of his defenses more effectively than any anger. Alaric watched her, the rigid structure of his emotional defenses beginning to fracture, tears misting his eyes for the first time in years. "You don't even know me," he whispered, a denial that felt weak and dishonest. "I know the Duke. Now I know the artist and the soldier," Serafina countered, finally lifting her hand and gently tracing the rough scar on his temple. "And I choose all three. They are one man. My husband." That night was the true marriage, not the ceremony, but the unconditional acceptance offered in a dusty, hidden room. He did not make love to her that night. The wounds were too deep for sudden physical intimacy. Instead, they sat by the fire in the drawing room, and for the first time, Alaric spoke freely, narrating the horror of the siege and the ensuing physical and emotional toll. Serafina listened without interruption, her silence a comforting balm to his tormented soul, her presence grounding his swirling memories. He confessed his shame, his fear that the music in his soul was now gone, replaced by the relentless, monotonous drum of duty. Serafina gently suggested that if his hands could not play, perhaps his voice could compose, or his mind could teach. "The duty of the Duke is to preserve the estate, yes. But the duty of the man is to live," she concluded, her wisdom exceeding her years. Slowly, Alaric began to resurface. He permitted Serafina to hire a music master to catalog his collection, discussing the manuscripts with a passion long thought lost. He started taking Serafina into his confidence regarding the estate finances, trusting her sharp organizational mind. Their dinners were no longer silent affairs, but spirited discussions about planting the next season's wheat or repairing the ancient manor roof. Serafina did not try to fix him. She simply moved into the broken spaces, bringing light and air to the dust and silence. She accepted his physical distance, knowing that emotional intimacy was the greater gift he was struggling to bestow. Alaric, in turn, began to look forward to seeing her. His routine dictated not by evasion but by the quiet anticipation of her company. He found that the sight of her practical nature and gentle smile was more soothing than any medication the physician had prescribed. One clear, cold evening, Alaric found Serafina near the window, looking up at the bright winter stars. He approached her slowly, no longer with the hesitation of a wounded creature, but with the deliberate intention of a man claiming his own. "Serafina," he murmured, placing a heavy, warm hand on her shoulder, a gesture of ownership and tenderness combined. "You came here for duty, and I gave you a ruin. You turned it into a home, and me into a man who can bear to live in it." She leaned her head back against his hand, finally feeling the weight of the Duke lift, replaced by the simple connection of a husband. "You were never a ruin, Alaric. Only a fortress, waiting for someone to find the right key to the gate." He turned her around, his hand cupping her cheek, his thumb gently smoothing the skin near her ear. The scars on his face no longer looked like wounds to Serafina, but like lines etched by survival, a testament to the strength she had fallen in love with. "I may never be the whole man you deserve, but I will be a man who accepts the love you offer," he promised, the sincerity in his voice a vow deeper than any reed at the altar. The wounded Duke and the dutiful lady found that their marriage of contract had blossomed into a true union of souls. Their shared future would not be one of dramatic passion, but of quiet, enduring partnership, built on acceptance, respect, and duty redefined by love. The true duty in life, they learned, was not to honor a family name, but to honor the truth of one's own heart, and the heart of the person entrusted to you. Alaric finally kissed his wife, a kiss that tasted of the cold, honest air of Blackwood and the warm promise of a life together. The manor was quiet no longer, was filled with the promise of healing, the echo of music, and the quiet dignity of a love earned. For more stories where duty meets destiny and love triumphs over all, be sure to comment, like, share, and subscribe to Storycraft Studio.